Hey guys, welcome back. Hope you guys are doing well. Hope you're having a great day, drinking lots of water, staying hydrated, have eaten something at some point today. If you haven't, now's your chance to, because we're sitting back, relaxing, and reading some scary stories today. It's been a while since I've done a scary stories Reddit stream. I finished Sally Face and I was like, you know what? I miss doing this. I have lots of fun doing this, so we're gonna get right back into it. I've missed it a lot. I've got some definitely new scary stories to look at. We're just gonna filter them real quick and then we're gonna jump right in. We're gonna do top ones for the past month because I think it's been about a month, maybe more, since the last time I've done one of these. Yeah, I'm gonna swap right over to my scary stories background and turn on my scary music. There for some ambiance. And we're gonna jump right in. Between every single story, I will be taking a sip of water, give you guys a chance to comment any of your thoughts, and I will read them. But yeah. So here we go. This one is called She Gets a Little Bit Closer to Me Every Day by Mr. Beef Thighs. This is from 29 days ago. She gets a little bit closer to me every day. The first time I noticed her, I was walking along the beach by myself. The shoreline was deserted with the exception of me and her. I could see her meandering behind about half a mile or so, her black dress and messy black hair blowing in the wind. Thought nothing of it at the time and carried on living my life, not knowing what was inching its way toward me with each passing moment. I didn't notice her again for months. The next time I saw her was in the Walmart parking lot. It was late, around 11 o'clock, and I walked out the store into the empty, oversized parking lot, bag of groceries in hand. There weren't too many cars left in the parking lot, and the ones that were there were lined up in spots closest to the store's entrance. She stood by herself near the back of the parking lot, under one of the light poles, probably around 150 to 200 yards from me, still too far to make out the face of this girl. But something about the black dress and black hair gave me a sense of déjà vu. I don't think I made the connection with the girl on the beach at the moment, but it was eerie nonetheless. I started noticing her more and more. Every time I had to park in a large parking lot like Walmart's or a movie theater, I could find her peeking at me from over the tops, or parked cars standing under a tree near the parking lot's exit. The same black dress and messy black hair. Eventually I started seeing her on my street. I'd peek out of my windows at night to see her partially obscured by the shadows behind my neighbor's house, or I would see her in the tree line of my own backyard. I called the police on her once. I told them someone was hiding in the woods behind my house and I wanted them to come check it out. I watched the police search the area while she stood in place, motionless, staring straight at me. The police walked circles around her. I could have sworn they even brushed up against her a few times, but the two officers told me they saw nothing. They didn't even find any footprints. It was all in my head then? I tried to put it out of my mind, but she kept getting closer and closer. I'd be eating at a restaurant with friends, only to see her standing at the bus stop across the street. I'd take my dog for a walk, and I'd see her looking at me through the windows of my neighbors' houses as I walked past. Closer and closer. When she was only about 40 to 50 feet away from me, I could make out her facial expression. A small bit of mascara ran down her cheek, but she was wearing a fresh smile. I couldn't comprehend it. Something about it made me think it was a happy, almost gleeful face. Maybe the tears were tears of joy. Sometimes I think it was the face of someone who had lost a loved one, but was remembering the good times they had together. When I was in a bad mood, I interpreted it as the face of a complete mental break. For 3 nights, she was pressed up against the windows of my house, watching me as I cooked, cleaned, and watched TV. I couldn't sleep. I turned off the lights, and the street lights would cast her shadow across my home in larger-than-life proportions. I tried to speak with her. I asked questions, I made demands, I begged, she pleaded, and begged and pleaded to tears, but she wouldn't answer. She never made a sound. She never moved. She never blinked. I took time off work. I wasn't sleeping or eating. I spent all the time I had pacing in my living room, screaming at the girl in my window or crying, thinking about how I'd completely lost it, how everything I'd worked so hard to build in this life had just come to a screeching halt due to a few bad neurons or chemical imbalances. As much as I tried to convince myself it really was all in my head, there was a feeling I couldn't shake. It all just felt so real. I mean, of course it did. My brain would be telling me it's real, just as any crazy person with hallucinations believe their visions to be real. But there was something about this girl I just can't explain. Like, I had known she would be showing up, and I should have had her arrival marked on my calendar or something. I can't explain it. I had to get some air, so I grabbed my dog and took her out for a walk. It was the longest walk of my dog's life. We walked for hours and ventured miles from our home, but we never managed to escape the woman who'd been watching us. She peeked at us from behind our neighbors' fences, watched us from behind the trees at the local parks. I even saw her staring at us from the back seat of a few cars that drove by us, but we kept walking. Out here, I feel less restricted, like I had options if I needed to run. Plus, there is something so violating about your own home, your one sanctuary being turned into a terrarium. I dreaded returning, but eventually we had to go home. The walk we had taken was quickly turning into animal abuse. My dog needed water and to rest her legs. Whatever I'd gotten into was my fault and not hers. When I got back to my house, my plan was to just ignore the creepy girl with her face pressed against my back window. I was exhausted and hadn't slept in days. I just wanted to have a glass of water, shower, and go to bed. I accomplished the first two steps easily, but I stumbled on the third. I couldn't resist a peek. I had to have another look at this girl. It's not something you can just ignore. If you were swimming in the ocean and someone yelled shark, would you not look for the shark? I peered around the corner of the hallway and looked out into the big back window where she had held sentry the past few nights. She was gone. When you're swimming in the ocean and someone yells shark, it's so much scarier when you can't see it. My mouth instantly went dry. I flipped on the floodlights that illuminated my backyard. Nothing. I ran through the darkened house to the front windows and looked out. Nothing. My mind was screaming. Up to this point, I had never been more terrified in my entire life. Where was she? The worst part was I couldn't shake the feeling I was being watched. I sat on the couch and held my head in my hands. No chance I was going to bed now. I was going to make some coffee and think. I stood up, walked to the kitchen, and flipped the lights, filling the once dark room with light in my periphery. I saw Fate. There she was, standing in the corner of the living room, peeking out at me from behind the drapes, just feet from where I was sitting on the couch. My stomach turned. She was in the house. This was a violation. This scared me. This offended me. This made me feel vulnerable and disgusting. I puked all over my kitchen floor, never daring to break eye contact with the girl in my living room. I made my coffee and sat at the kitchen table with the knife in my hand. No idea what the knife would do against whatever this girl was, but without it, I felt completely naked. We stared at each other for hours. I threw things at her, but they all just seemed to pass through her. I had to do something. What I was going to do, stare at this thing until I inevitably died from lack of sleep. I made a decision. I ran into the garage and jumped in the car. I'd at least get this thing out of my home. I opened the garage door and stared at the car, but as I turned to go back out of the driveway, I found her sitting directly behind me in the back seat. That was too much for me. I was absolutely revolted by the idea of being that close to it. I got out of the car and I started running. I ran for miles. Each time I looked back, I could see her keeping pace with me, never gaining ground or falling behind. Always close. Very close. Eventually, I got to my destination, the police station. At the very least, they could put in a cell put it in a cell with 24-hour security. That one, as well as I hoped. The police are good for anything. It's putting mentally ill people in cells. I was thrown into solitary cell. About 8 feet by 8 feet. Small bedroll, a toilet, a sink. I don't even remember what the charges were. I was just so happy to be somewhere with other people. To have witnesses for whatever is going to happen to me. Because I didn't lose her. Even sitting in my jail cell, she was still there. Pressing her face in the glass window of my cell door. But I was too tired to care. At least she wasn't in there with me at the moment. I don't know how long I slept for, but when I woke up, she was kneeling down next to me with the same pained smile on her face. Before I could even scream, she reached her arm out and touched my left shoulder, which instantly exploded in a sharp pain that radiated down my arm and across my chest. I started screaming. My breath grew short and my vision started to narrow. My heart felt like it was being gripped and squeezed by a phantom hand. I tried to stand up but fell over onto my belly. I yelled for help, but my vision still closed in around me. Then I woke up in the hospital. I had suffered a heart attack. Luckily for me, there was paramedics in the building to save me. All this happened about 6 months ago. I started seeing her again about 6 weeks ago. She's moving more quickly this time. Within a few short weeks, I could see her face. She looks angry now, almost like she's angry with me specifically. She's also holding something, but I can't tell what it is. She keeps it hidden behind her back. I'm writing on my laptop in bed and she's standing in my bedroom doorway glaring at me with the same grimace she's had for a few weeks now. In a few minutes, I'm going to take a sleeping pill and go to bed. I expect she'll be standing at my bedside if or when I do wake up. Then I guess I'll finally figure out what she's hiding behind her back. I'm not scared. I'm just ready to get this all over with. I do feel guilty about leaving my dog behind. I try to give her a good life. I've already left a message for my sister to come to get her at noon tomorrow. She has a key, and I hope I'm there to greet her. But only time will tell. And that was the end of it. Read some comments here. Top 1 says, a sense of impending doom is a symptom of heart attacks, and she could be a physical manifestation of that symptom. Maybe you should use the occasion of her getting closer as a sign to visit an emergency room for testing right away. It may be that she's trying to save your life. And someone replied with, or if she's angry, it's that he escaped her once already, and he was supposed to die the first time. But how weird is it we get the sense of a pending doom like that? Everyone's saying, sounds like it could be symbolic for a heart attack. Aw, thank you for making arrangements for your dog, though. Aw. Reminds me of the unshakable feeling you're being watched, but you can't tell where from or by whom. And someone responded with, humans know when we're being watched. We still even wake up from a sound sleep when someone's watching us, which makes waking up when you know you're alone. You don't have to potty, you're not thirsty or hungry, so it's not a bodily function, just the worst thing. I'm always praying it's a cat, just one of my kitty babies checking me out since I watch them sleep when they're adorable. I hope. Or maybe a loud noise that's already dissipated. Someone said, hope you, if all else fails, please keep a 3-foot iron pole to try and whack her or something. I heard it harms spirits. A sprinkle of salt around your bed. Best of luck. I need to clear my throat. Hang on. Alright, that's that one. Let's move on to the next one. Okay, this one is called A Bus Picked Up My Kid 4 days ago by Beneath the Park. The school bus picked up my kid 4 days ago. After he was gone, I just went about my day like I always do. When school was over, I waited at the end of our driveway, but a school bus never came. When I called the school, they said my son had never arrived. He got on the bus, I told them. There was silence. We don't doubt he got on a bus, they told me, but it wasn't one of ours. When I started freaking out, they told me I wasn't alone. The same thing had happened to 18 other children this morning, and the police were on top of it. When I asked what that meant, they simply said, they're working on it. They know. I keep going back to that morning trying to remember something, anything, but the same things I remember are the reason I wasn't paying attention. The bus was yellow. It was long. It had wheels. What am I supposed to remember about a bus? The thing pulls up and you kiss your kid and that's it. 5 times a week and the routine gets so redundant, a submarine might have pulled up and I'm not sure I would have noticed. 3 days ago, the parents of the missing kids got together at the rec center to put their heads together and support each other in grief. Everyone was crying and rerunning the theories they had had for days. Some of them were absolutely crazy. There wasn't any complicated thread connecting the kids, really. They were all in elementary school and lived in the same neighborhood, and that was about it. Some people think the school is covering something up. Or maybe the bus company. But the drivers are accounted for, and the school's got nothing to gain. Everyone local knows about it already, and there's some parents are keeping their kids home until this is figured out. 2 days ago, the parents received something in their mailbox. It must have come in the normal mail. In a little white envelope, there was a drawing from their child. All were of school buses exploring something different. The edge of a cliff, the bottom of the sea, a barn on fire, the thickest, blackest woods. On the back of the drawings, written in cursive with the same black handwriting neat as a crew cut, it's just a little trip. Yesterday, halfway to California, the police are saying they found a field with 18 scarecrows. Each was wearing our children's clothes. At the edge of the field, scratched in the mud in big letters, were the lyrics, "The wheels on the bus go round and round, round and round, round and round. The wheels on the bus go round and round all the way." This morning, I'm standing on the curb and I've picked up smoking again, and I'm waiting for the bus to come back. I've done it every day, of course, in the morning and after school. Every day I'm twice as terrified as the last. I hear the diesel, and the bus comes rolling around the corner. The bus is yellow, the bus is long, the bus has wheels, the bus has children, but none of them are mine. That's the end of that. Some comments. This one says, "Well, I want to know if the kids went missing in the morning, why didn't the school say anything until you called in the afternoon? The school knew there was an emergency and didn't tell parents until the parents called. That to me sounds like a cover-up. They were probably hoping to find the kids before they had to tell their parents they were lost. I'm guessing the school did nothing for a while because a large school bus isn't the easiest thing to hide from the cops. Very weird. Hope they find who took them." And if the bus that picked them up wasn't one of theirs, then what happened to the regular scheduled bus and driver? Or did nobody notice a second bus come by for their kiddos? Someone said, "This is why most buses at the schools my kids go to only have a number. Not only have a number, but a second form of identification, usually an animal or color, presented in the window. We commonly had multiple buses arriving at different times, so we always had to be thorough in checking." Everyone's saying it's the school's fault. Anyway. This one. It's called I'm Taking Care of a Local Farm for a Few Weeks. They Left Me a Strange Set of Rules by Blair Daniels. A few miles north of me, there's a little family-owned farm. The family takes a vacation in July, though, and they posted a job listing for a caretaker. My job could include feeding the animals, making sure the irrigation is working, and harvesting some crops. It's a small operation, so it's not fields and fields of stuff. Plus, they were offering $2,000. At the time, that seemed like an amazing deal. Now I'm not so sure. See, the Gershons left me detailed instructions in the envelope, along with half of the stipend. As I sat down to read it, I realized that sounded a little strange. Dear Emily, thank you for taking care of our farm. To ensure your safety and happiness and the animals, we've included a list of instructions and tasks. 1. Please feed the goats and chickens at 6 a.m. sharp. They get pretty cranky if it's not on time. 2. You'll need to prune off the floricanes in the raspberry patch. To do this, cut the canes, branches, that are woody and have already fruited. Wear thick gloves because there are thorns. If you get cut, immediately head inside and call Dr. Livesey to make sure your wound is not infected. 3. The sunflower field is easy to maintain and brings beauty to our farm. However, if you see a sunflower that isn't facing the same direction as the others, immediately head inside. Do not return to the sunflower field until the following day. 4. The farm is, as you know, surrounded by forest. Sometimes you get coyotes, foxes, or other wild animals prowling around the grounds at night. Don't worry, the animal pens are completely secure and there is no need to check on the animals if you hear anything at night. In fact, we recommend you do not leave the farmhouse between sunset and sunrise. 5. Do not enter the corn maze. Even if you hear noises coming from the maze that sound like a child crying, do not enter. The corn maze is not open to visitors yet. It is most likely the bobcats in the woods. 6. Do not be alarmed if you see the goats awake in the middle of the night. They are semi-nocturnal and often wake up to roam, graze, or use the bathroom. 7. You may help yourself to any of the fruits or vegetables you harvest. However, do not eat the apples from the northwest corner of the orchard. 8. We no longer use scarecrows. If you see one, please return to the house, lock all the doors, and close the curtains. Stay inside until the following morning. 9. Make sure to always stock the farm stand twice a day. In the morning and again in the afternoon. At night, take all the unsold produce inside and store it in the refrigerator. 10. We do not own any pigs. Thank you so much, Emily, the Gershons. I glanced out the window. The sun was hanging low over the trees, orange rays filtering through the forest. If I'm not supposed to be out after dark because of the wolves or whatever, I better get cracking. I walked over to the goats first. They huddled close to me as I filled their food bins, staring at me with their weird slit pupils. I tried to get it done as quickly as possible. Goats honestly freaked me out a little bit. As I hurried away, one with black and white fur pushed its little face through the fence. It bleated, staring at me. The chickens were more skeptical of me, staring and letting out long walks as I bobbed their heads. As soon as they realized I had food, though, they came over and pecked the ground. They were pretty cute, actually. I locked the gate and turned toward the house. I froze. Across the field from me stood the field of sunflowers, bright golden petals and dark centers swaying slightly in the wind. But while all of them tilted away from me, facing the dying sun, one of them, near the edge of the field, was instead facing me. I stared at its pitch-black center. Didn't they say something about that? Go inside if one of the sunflowers is pointing a different way. I locked up the chicken gate. Then I strode across the grass across the old farmhouse, still carrying the bag of chicken feed. I was halfway to the house when I turned around again. I wish I hadn't. The sunflower is still facing me, even though based on my path it shouldn't have been. I picked up my pace toward the house. Come on, what do you think's going to happen? That sunflower is going to chase after you and murder you? My brain knew it was stupid, but there was something instinctual, a gut feeling that forced my legs to pump harder. I didn't even bother dropping the feed off at the shed. I raced to the house and locked all the doors. Safe. I took a final glance out of the sunflower. Then I went to the tiny kitchen and started some water boiling for pasta. By the time I was sitting down to eat, I was shaking my head. So stupid, afraid of a sunflower. Something woke me up in the middle of the night. Sat up, my neck aching from the crappy pillow they'd left for me. I looked around my tiny bedroom, but nothing seemed amiss. Well, of course there were things amiss, like a peeling paint and the light bulb that flickered and clogged toilet, but nothing different. I yawned and checked my phone. 3:12 a.m. Sighing, I settled back to sleep. But before I drifted off, I heard it. A small, high-pitched noise, coming from outside. I slowly forced myself out of bed and walked over to the window. Underneath me, the farm sprawled out into darkness, but it was distorted in the old grass, shapes and colors bleeding into each other like running paint. I flipped the window lock and pushed it open, the wood squeaking loudly in my ears. I listened. Silence, then. Help me. A voice, a child's voice, coming from the direction of the cornfield. That's no bobcat. My blood ran cold, staring out into the darkness at the cornfield and the edge of the woods, hoping that it was just some lingering dream or something. But as I stood there, the cold summer breeze wafting into the room, I heard it again. Please help me. The voice wavered as if the child was crying. I squinted into the darkness, staring at the cornfield. I have to go out there. I remember the Gershons ruled, but there was no way this was an animal. Hey, I'm coming, don't worry, I shouted out the window. Silence, then a rustling sound. I squinted at the cornfield and I could see the stalks moving as something moved within them. Stay where you are, I shouted into the darkness. I'm coming to get you. The corn stalks continued to move, and every muscle in my body froze. The amount of corn moving? There was no way it was just a small child in there. The corn was swaying, dancing, rolling in an area maybe 10 feet across. It was making its way toward the edge of the field, rapidly. Shut the window, closed my blinds, my heart hammering in my chest. I raced downstairs and checked the locks, and then finally, when I was sure I was safe, I called the police. But they wouldn't even come out. There are no missing children in the area. What you saw was most likely a bear, they explained calmly. I think they know all about the Gershons' farm. So now I lie here in my bed, listening for the snaps and rustles of the corn stalks. There's a chair wedged under my doorknob. I've triple-checked all the locks. And all I can do is wait for dawn. There's a part 2. There's multiple parts. Oh, buckle in, boys. Here we go. Part 2. 6 a.m. came all too early. The alarm blared in my ears, and I forced myself out of bed groaning. The sun had just crested over the hill, and the sky was lit with the pale gray of dawn. I could hear the rooster crowing already. I looked out the window, scanned the farm. Everything looked normal. All the sunflowers were facing halfway toward me in the direction of the rising sun. The cornfield was still. The chickens were milling about the coop, packing the ground. I went downstairs, grabbed the bag of feed I'd never put away, and went out to the coop. The chickens were probably the only part of the farm I liked. Fat little hens ran toward me as I poured the food on the ground, making happy noises. They packed it up. I locked the gate and stared over the hill, toward the shed to get the goat feed. That's when I heard it. Oink. Stopped in my tracks. The Gershons' note said they didn't own any pigs. Oink. The note didn't say anything about avoiding the pigs, though, so I was free to go fetch the goat feed, right? Started walking again up the hill. Oink. And that's when I realized there was something off about the sound. It sounded almost human, like a person saying oink instead of an actual animal sound. For a second I had a weird mental image of a naked man covered in his own filth, crouching on the ground saying oink over and over. Oink. I shook my head and continued up the hill. When I got to the top, I saw the source of a noise. A fat pink pig standing in the grass. I let out a breath of relief. See? It's just an ordinary pig. Passed the pig, ignoring it completely, and opened the shed. Put the chicken feed in. Pulled out the goat feed. started back up the hill. Stopped dead as my eyes fell on the pig. Its face. It looked almost human. Its fleshy pink snout was shorter than it should be. Its curled little ears sat low and flat on its head. Its eyes, they weren't round and beady, but almost almond-shaped like a person's, with dark pupils that stared up at me in a way that suggested intelligence. The feedback fell out of my hands. I stumbled back, but the pig didn't advance. It just stared at me with its human eyes. Backed away, keeping my eyes on it. Slowly walked around it, so I was going back toward the house. When I got over the hill, that horrible little face was finally out of my sight. I whipped around and broke into a run. What was that? I panted to myself as I locked the front door behind me. Not knowing what else to do, I pulled up my phone and I called the police. When they picked up, I wasn't sure what to say. I found a pig that doesn't look like a pig. On the farm, the Gershon's farm. Did you touch the pig? The officer cut in. What? Did you have any contact with the pig? Any at all? No? Good. We'll send out an officer to deal with it. 15 minutes later, I saw a police car pull up in the driveway. They asked me where I'd seen it, then told me to stay inside. I went over to the window and watched them walk up the hill, then disappear. A minute passed, then a shrill squeak erupted in silence. 5 minutes later, the officers reappeared carrying a large plastic bag that swung with each step. Hey, I called out as I headed for the cruiser. What was that thing? The officers glanced at each other. Rabies, the female officer said, while the male stuffed the bag into the back seat. A bunch of rabid pigs had been showing up in this area. Gonna send it off to get tested. Good thing he didn't touch it. Before I could ask her more questions, she hopped into the driver's side and they were gone. I stared out the window, utterly perplexed. Why didn't the Gershons tell me to stay away from the pigs? After the debacle with the pig, I decided to take it easy. I made a wholesome breakfast, read a few chapters of the thriller I was working through, and called my boyfriend. Around 11 a.m., though, I realized I'd forgotten to stock the farm stand. It was still technically morning, so I ran out to the field, filled my hod with zucchini and tomatoes, and ran down the driveway as fast as I could without spilling any produce. But as the little farm stand came into view, I saw that there was already someone waiting. Checked my watch, 11:49 a.m. So sorry, I breathed as I spread the produce out on the wooden table. I was supposed to get this out earlier, but there's a pig and it just... Something made me stop rambling. I glanced up to see the person there was a little odd. He was an old man, probably about 6 feet tall and very thin. He wore, surprisingly, a crisp black suit, an old-timey bowler hat in the sweltering heat. He was smiling at me, but his teeth were deeply yellow and crooked, and his eyes were sunken back into his skull. Nothing unnatural about him, just a slightly creepy-looking guy. But in a way, he reminded me of the creepy dudes from that one Buffy the Vampire episode where they kept taking everyone's voices. That episode's so good. So, what are you looking for today? I asked, when he didn't move any of the produce. The Gershons aren't here? Shook my head. Won't be back for 2 weeks. They didn't tell me they were leaving. Oh, you know them? Yeah, you could say that. I waited for him to either take the produce or leave, but he didn't do either. He just stood there, looking at me. The way his blue eyes cut into mine made a chill run down my spine. It wasn't a predatory or sexual stare. It felt like he was examining me, studying me, trying to read every tilt of my head and blink of my eyes. It made me extremely uncomfortable. So, you interested in any of this? The tomatoes looked really good today. I said, try not to sound nervous. Or if you're looking for something else, I can go pick it for you. Only the Gershons can provide what I'm looking for. Okay, well, I'm gonna go back up to the farm. If you change your mind, the prices are listed on the whiteboard, and you just leave the money in the box. I shot him a fake smile, turned around, and headed up the hill as quickly as I could without seeming weird. But then he said something that made my blood run cold. Emily? I never told him my name. The smartest thing would have been to run, but instead I turned around. He wasn't chasing me. He was still standing at the farm stand 10 yards away from me. I wouldn't trust the Gershons if I were you, he called out. Then he turned on his heel and strode away. As I watched him go, I realized there wasn't any car parked at the bottom of the driveway. He just turned onto the old country road and walked away. I watched him until he rounded the bend and disappeared from sight. I retreated into the house, checked all the locks, and decided I would spend the rest of the day inside, at least until it was time to feed the animals and stock the farm stand again. Moving to part 3. When I fed the goats that evening, they still seemed mad at me from the morning. With all the pig business, I hadn't gotten their morning meal to them until nearly 10 a.m., and as I entered the pen, they eyed me warily. A brown one bleated, with a look of betrayal in his slit-pupil eyes. My last task of the day was picking up the unsold produce. I hurried down the driveway, garden hod in my arms, an audiobook playing through my earbuds. The sun hung low in the sky, casting shadows that stretched across the driveway before me. The sun wasn't setting yet. That wouldn't be for another hour, but it still made me nervous. Most of the produce was gone, but I grabbed 3 remaining zucchini and put them on the hod. I turned around and hurried up the hill as fast as I could, but when I crested the hill, I saw something in the fields that made my heart stop. A scarecrow. Its arms stretched out at its sides, its head hung limply on its shoulders. I couldn't see it in detail, it was too far away, but I could see its silhouette clearly. I immediately broke into a sprint. Just get inside, you'll be fine. I focused on the white door. It was still so far away, but I forced myself to stare at it, to keep my eyes from the scarecrow. Just run as fast as you can. And I made it. I slammed the door shut, drew the deadbolt, closed all the curtains, checked the other locks, and then collapsed onto the couch and called my boyfriend Derek. You have to come here, I told him. There's someone out there, and I ran inside, but I think I rambled incoherent sentences, but he interrupted me. Wait, slow down. You think there's someone out there? Yes. Are you sure? Derek was a good man, but he often thought I was being a little too paranoid, a little too scared. When I insisted I was being followed home from work, he told me it was probably nothing, and just some guy walking over the same route as me. When I heard sounds in the middle of the night, he insisted it was the house settling. When I watched the true crime shows and told him how we need to do X or Y so we don't fall victim to a crime like that, he'd just laugh. It wasn't intentionally mean, but in these moments, it was painfully obvious he'd grown up as a man with little to be afraid of in his world. Yes, I'm sure. They said the farm doesn't use scarecrows, and there's a scarecrow standing on the hill watching me. I heard a loud sigh on the other end. Are you saying you don't believe me? I didn't say anything, he said calmly. You sighed. Okay, sorry, it just sounds really... Never mind. Please just come here, I'll explain everything. Why don't you come over here? Because if I go outside, the scarecrow will get me. Silence. Then I realized that sentence did sound pretty unhinged, and on its own. Listen, there's been really weird stuff happening on this farm. Then I launched into an explanation of everything, the list of rules, the sunflowers, the cornfield, and even the pig man. Why didn't you tell me this earlier? He asked when I had finished. Because you wouldn't believe me, you still don't. I'm trying to. Just this sounds like a lot of ghost story type stuff, you know? Another sigh. But look, I can tell you're upset. I'm coming over, okay? I'm leaving right now, I'll be there in a half hour. I ended the call and stared out the curtains. For a minute I was tempted to part them, but I made to make sure the scarecrow hadn't gotten closer, but I wasn't going to disobey the rules. When Derek arrived, I took every precaution to get him inside safely. I told him to park as close to the house as possible, look around for scarecrows, and then run as fast as he could. As soon as he was inside safely, my fear melted away. We put on a movie, had some good laughs, and went to bed. But around 2 a.m., something woke me with a start. When I sat up, I realized Derek was gone. Derek? I called out, walking into the hallway. Where are you? When he didn't reply, I walked downstairs. I found him standing in front of the window, peering outside. Hey, I hissed. You're not supposed to look outside. Shh, there's someone out there. My blood ran cold. I don't see anyone. No, there was definitely someone out there. His fingers inched toward his belt, and my heart plummeted when I saw the shiny black metal sticking out of his pocket. You brought your gun? You said you were scared, he whispered back. You said there was someone out there. I didn't really believe you, but now I do. Aren't you glad I brought it? No. I never want to be near that thing. Okay. We can have some stupid debate about gun rights later. Right now, there's someone out there. And if we just go back to sleep, we might not wake up in the morning. Derek. I'm telling it like it is. I crossed my arms and stared out into the fields with him, and then, just as I was about to turn away, I saw it. A shadowy figure, walking across the edge of the sunflower field. Derek didn't waste any time. He unbolted the door and swung it open. Hey, you! Get off our property, I've got a gun. The figure stopped, paused, and then sidestepped into the sunflowers. Before I could stop him, Derek ran out of the house. Derek, I shouted, but he didn't stop. I paused at the threshold and sprinted out after him. Come back! He was running straight for the sunflower field. Don't go in there! He probably wouldn't have even stopped, but when he got to the border, I screamed bloody murder for him, and he stopped for just a moment. You can't go in there, he panted. I panted, grabbing his arm. The sunflowers. Yeah, you told me. They're evil or watch you or something. I think I can handle myself. He gestured to his gun. If I don't scare this guy, he's going to come back or murder or do whatever he came here to do. And with that, he disappeared into the foliage. I stood there panting at the border of the field. He'll be okay, I lied to myself. He'll be okay. As the adrenaline faded, I lifted my head and I scanned the flowers. They all turned toward me, yellow petals appearing silver in the light of the full moon. Okay, it's okay. They're all pointing the same direction, see? Wait. There was a single flower in the center of the field turned away from me. My blood ran cold. Derek, come out of there. Silence. No pounding footsteps. No rustling, nothing. Chill ran over my body. Please come out, I begged, staring at the shadowy darkness under the flowers. Then I heard it. Help. Derek's voice, strangled in pain. I reacted instinctively. My feet hit the dirt and I stumbled into the darkness. Leaves brushed my body, scratching at my arms. Derek? The sunflowers stretched up 6 or 7 feet tall, their moonlit heads swaying in the breeze above me. I turned a full circle, looking in every direction for Derek, but all I saw were more stems, more leaves, more inky black shadows. Derek, where are you? I stopped walking and listened, straining my ears for some sort of sound, and then, after several seconds, I heard something, a soft rustling. There was just one problem. It was coming from right above my head. I looked up. The sunflower directly above me was tilted straight down. And this close, I saw it clearly. Its head wasn't full of seeds, no. Where the seeds should have been, there was just an abyss of pure black. There were things between the petals of the abyss, white, sharp things, all pointed toward the center. Teeth. I broke into a sprint. With both arms, I pushed the sunflowers out of the way, forcing myself through the field. Derek, I screamed. But all I heard was more rustling above my head as the sunflowers tilted toward me, as their mouths opened and rows of sharp fangs gleaming in the moonlight descended toward me. Then something grabbed my arm. I was dragged through the fields, the foliage snapping and rustling beneath me. Help, I screamed, but my legs kicked against the dirt and I realized I was powerless as I was getting dragged to my death. Staring up at the stars. I shot up. The thing clasped around my arm wasn't a sunflower, it was a hand, an old, wrinkled hand. I looked up to see a bowler hat and a dark suit. The old man from the farm stand. And there, several feet away from me in the dirt, was Derek. He was breathing hard, alive, but his right arm was covered in dark blood that spilled out into the soil. I think it's time we had a talk, he said calmly as he let go of my arm. Part 4, my God. What were you thinking going into the sunflowers? The old man asked as he wound gauze around Derek's arm. What were you thinking? I saw you go into the field too, he replied. I went behind the field to hide from the crazy man with a gun. You were lurking around there at 2 a.m. What was I supposed to think? Derek shot back, grimacing in pain. And you, the old man said, pointing squarely at me. You should have known that if he couldn't kill whatever is attacking him with a gun, going in after him was an idiot move. I just wanted to save him, I said, arms crossed. Oh, so you are armed too? No. He shook his head. I caught the phrase stupid kids muttered under his breath. Then he took off his hat, set it in the middle of the table, and glanced at each of us. I'm going to tell you what's going on here, and then I hope you can help me. Derek and I exchanged a glance. How do we know we can trust you? He asked. You just saved our lives, I replied. He was hanging around outside in the middle of the night for no good reason. It was a good reason, the old man snapped, glaring at Derek. And if you just listened to me for a minute, you'd understand. Come on, I whispered, squeezing Derek's hand. Okay, fine. The old man straightened himself, then began to speak. The Gershons started this farm almost 20 years ago. They bought the plot of land from an old widow who lived here her entire life. She didn't want to sell it, but she needed the money. They drew up the contract, but at the last moment they changed the paperwork and tricked her into selling it for half the price. When she realized she'd been tricked, she cursed the land itself. But they just laughed. They didn't believe in curses or superstitions or the supernatural. The old man stopped and looked pointedly at Derek. He broke eye contact and looked at the floor. Of course, as soon as they planted the sunflower field, they realized the curse was very real. Eventually, they tried to sell the property, but by the time the news of the curse had spread out, they would only get a fraction of what they paid. They weren't willing to lose their money, so they kept it. And with time, they learned that if they followed certain rules and stayed careful, they could grow some crops and turn a profit. But no one's perfect. After some close calls, the Gershons decided they didn't want to risk their lives, but were perfectly fine with risking other people's lives. So they started hiring people to tend to the farm. They preyed on the weak, the disadvantaged, the desperate, single mothers, undocumented immigrants, people who were new to town, who hadn't heard of the curse, or were too desperate to care. The deal was a good one. A share of the crops, a place to live, a decent pay. This is where I come in. My daughter was one of these people. She was a single mother, and I was terrible. He paused and swallowed as if swallowing an emotion, but his face remained stoic. I wouldn't let her and her son stay with me when she was evicted from her apartment. I thought it would cause too much conflict with my wife, and I was trying so hard to make it work. But now I see that none of that mattered. He sucked in a breath. A few weeks later, she was hired by the Gershons, and neither she nor my grandson were ever seen again. Derek and I sat there in stunned silence. So sorry, I choked out. That's horrible. Then help me get them back. Get them back? They're not dead. I recognize the voice in the cornfield. It's the voice of my grandson. Silence fell over the three of us. The old man must have noticed our confusion because he continued. The victims aren't always killed. Sometimes they're transformed, like my daughter and grandson in the cornfield. Or the scarecrow. Or the pigs. I clapped my hand over my mouth. The pigs? He nodded. No, I called the police when I saw one and they came and I think they killed him. Sorry to hear that, but it's not your fault. The Gershons have a lot of power in this town. They have a deal with the police. Dirty cops have been known to get rid of evidence in the sunflower field. I've devoted the past 3 years of my life to this. I've run into every obstacle, know everything there is to know. A lot of it I learned from the widow's children directly. So is there a way to get them back, the people who were transformed? Yes. I was never able to get into the house before. The Gershons made sure of that, but now? He reached into his pocket and pulled out what appeared to be a small mesh bag. Within, among what looked like a dried plant material, I could make out something long and white. A bone? This is what the widow used to create the curse. Her daughter told me it was hidden behind the medicine cabinet in the bathroom. And there it was. Using this, I should be able to reverse the curse's effects. So will you help me? I nodded. We began at dawn. The sun crested over the hill, sending long shadows over the path. The man led us to the edge of the cornfield, which now in the daylight didn't look so ominous. The stalks swayed gently in the breeze, illuminated in gold from the rising sun. "You ready?" he asked. Derek and I stood several feet away as he lifted the bag. He recited several sentences of Latin or some other language, something he'd memorized in his research, I assumed. He nearly shouted the last sentence. Then he dumped the contents of the bag on the ground. The dried leaves scattered into the wind. The bone whirled in the air, then bounced into the dirt. For a moment, nothing happened. But then I heard a soft rustling from the corn. Slowly it grew louder and louder. I grabbed Derek's hand and squeezed it, bracing myself for some eldritch horror to come out. But it worked. A woman walked out of the corn, tall and thin, holding hands with a smiling little boy. I watched, my eyes welling up with tears, as the woman hugged her father, then as both of them hugged the little boy. "Come on," the old man said. "It's time for you to come home." The old man started down the driveway toward the main road with his daughter and grandson in his wake. Dread twisted my gut. Something felt off. He was just leaving without looking for the others? Without even a glance in our direction? I scanned the farm, but I didn't see anyone emerging, didn't hear any voices. "Hey, what about the others?" The old man stopped. He turned around. "I'm sorry." My heart sunk further. "What do you mean you're sorry?" "The curse can't be reversed. The only way to free someone from the farm is to give someone in their place." No, he doesn't mean." "I'm sorry," the old man said. He put his arm around his daughter. She looked back at us with sadness in her eyes, holding her little boy's hand. Then he continued down the driveway. "Don't walk away," I screamed. "Emily. Come back here right now. Emily." This time Derek's voice had an odd quality to it. It was muffled, raspy. I whipped around and froze. Straw was poking out of Derek's mouth. "No." I screamed, stumbling over him, but it was too late. His skin was sickly gray, his eyes were glassy and blank, and his lips, they almost looked like they'd been drawn on with marker. I watched in horror as the man I loved turned into a scarecrow. "Derek, please." His body was still above me, arms stretched stiffly out at his sides, flannel shirt stuffed with straw, burlap head hanging limply on his shoulders, and then he moved. His head swung wildly toward me, his eyes, now nothing more than buttons, fixed squarely on me. I ran as fast as I could toward the house, but I could feel something changing inside me. Everything fell off balance. My legs felt all wrong, bending and twisting beneath me. I stumbled inside and collapsed to the floor, crying. But I knew I was changing too. For some reason, my changes are happening more slowly than Derek's, but looking in the mirror, I can see the changes. My nose is longer, my ears are twisted, my skin is pinker. So I tried to type this up as quickly as I could. "Please stay away from the Gershon farm. Don't buy their stuff. Don't go to work there. Don't do anything. Run as fast as you can and never look back." I would say more, but it's getting harder to type. The space between my fingers is melting away. My hands are growing stiff. Just an hour or so, they will be hooves, and I will have no way of communicating with the outside world, so please, whatever you do, don't come to the Gershon farm. That's finally the end. 4-parter, my gosh. Someone said, "What's crazy is the Gershons probably have surveillance and watch the whole thing. How else would they be able to keep replacing people in time for the animals to stay alive?" That's why you never trust a strange old men who wear suits in 90-degree weather. What an unfortunate end. But the pigs can do a lot of damage, and when the Gershons are old, one bite in the ankle, a body would drop, and you would have your revenge. Not that you'll ever see this OP, but good luck. Well, I can't say I'm surprised. After constantly breaking the rules and making some really stupid decisions, this is now the result. Maybe one day someone will come and rescue you and Derek. Well, that was fun. We are going to end. Let's move over. On that happy note, let's move over. Thank you guys so much for watching today's stream. I hope you enjoyed. A lot of that gave me chills, so that was great. I will be back tomorrow at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard for some Minecraft, so I'll see you guys then. We'll see if there's any friends we can raid today, and while I'm doing that, if you're watching on YouTube and you enjoyed, please consider subscribing. It takes 2 seconds and it's completely free, so you can always unsubscribe later. None of our friends are streaming today, so we are just going to end, so I will see you guys tomorrow. Have a great rest of your day, guys. Bye.